الرحمن الرحيم. إلهي قلبي محجوب ونفسي معيوب وعقلي مغلوب وهواي غالب وطاعتي قليل ومعصيتي كثير ولساني مقر بالذنوب، فكيف حيلتي يا ستار العيوب ويا علام الغيوب ويا كاشف الكروب. اغفر ذنوبي كلها بحرمة محمد وآل محمد، يا غفار يا غفار يا غفار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل له كل شيء، وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعدم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فادح من البلاء عقلت وكم من عثار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومقالي يا سيدي. فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فقرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعد أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي بي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني. ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتقضيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك مسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك. يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكتوب يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته، فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك. فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك. فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وضاقت أعماقها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل رحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي. فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها. هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملاها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملت كتمته أو أعلنت أخفيته أو أظهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بالضر ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعدم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها بردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد ومن كادني فكيد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة، فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء، يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء، يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى. ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابق النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين فالغلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. اللهم صل على
محمد الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء، أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء، أما يجيب المضطر إذا. يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله، يا من لا يقال لغيره يا الله، فرج عنا فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو هو أقرب. اللهم شافي كل مريض، اللهم فك كل أسير، اللهم رد كل غريب، اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين واخذل الكفر والمنافقين، وانصرنا على القوم الظالمين، وعجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن
صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه
في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الخلق أجمعين، نبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين، والبراءة من أعدائهم أجمعين، من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. إخوة الإيمان، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال ربنا تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الحكيم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يوم ندعو كل أناس بإمامهم. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. روى شيخنا الكليني رضوان الله تعالى عليه في الكافي عن الفضيل بن يسار أنه قال: سألت أبا عبد الله عليه السلام، أي الإمام الصادق، عن قول الله تبارك وتعالى: يوم ندعو كل أناس بإمامهم. فقال: يا فضيل، اعرف إمامك، فإنك إذا عرفت إمامك لم يضرك تقدم هذا الأمر أو تأخر. ومن عرف إمامه ثم مات قبل أن يقوم صاحب هذا الأمر كان بمنزلة من كان قاعدا في عسكره، لا بل بمنزلة من قعد تحت لوائه. أشارت هذه الرواية الشريفة عن إمامنا الصادق عليه السلام إلى ضرورة وأهمية معرفة الإمام. فما هو المقصود من هذه المعرفة؟ بعبارة أخرى، ما الذي يجب علينا أن نعرفه عن الإمام؟ هنالك العديد من الروايات التي تحدثت عن مقامات الأئمة عليهم السلام، وروايات أخرى تحدثت عن المراد من معرفة الإمام ومراتب هذه المعرفة. نريد في هذه الليلة أن نسلط الضوء على رواية تحدثت عن أدنى مراتب تلك المعرفة. هذه الرواية أوردها شيخنا المجلسي رضوان الله تعالى عليه في بحار الأنوار عن الإمام الصادق عليه السلام أنه قال: وأدنى معرفة الإمام أنه عدل النبي إلا درجة النبوة، يا علي أنت مني بمنزلة هارون إلا أنه لا نبي بعدي. ووارثه، الإمام وارث النبي، وارث علمه، وارث مقاماته إلا ما خرج بالدليل. وأن طاعته طاعة الله وطاعة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. والتسليم له في كل أمر. التسليم للإمام من الأمور التي تجب على كل مسلم ومؤمن معتقد بإمامتهم صلوات الله وسلامه عليهم، أن نسلم لهم في كل ما ورد عنهم. نعم، قد يقول قائل: الأحاديث والروايات المروية عنهم صلوات الله وسلامه عليهم ليست كلها ثابتة، وهذا صحيح، ولكن هنا لا بد أن نقف عند مسألة في غاية الأهمية لكي نوضحها. الروايات من حيث صدورها عن أهل البيت عليهم السلام أو عدم صدورها، أو من حيث ما هو معتبر مما هو ليس بمعتبر، على ثلاثة أقسام. القسم الأول ما ثبت عنهم، ما يمكن الاحتجاج به، ما يمكن أن يقال عنه أنه معتبر، وردنا بسند معتبر، أو نقطع بصدوره كالمتواتر أو الذي تحف به القرائن ونطمئن أنه صادر عنهم صلوات الله وسلامه عليهم. هذا القسم الأول، وهذا مما لا شك في وجوب الأخذ به والعمل به، لا مجال لرده لأنه ثبت بطريق معتبر عنهم. والقسم الثاني هو الحديث الذي ثبت بالدليل أنه مكذوب، وهذه الأحاديث قليلة جدا بالقياس إلى تراثنا الروائي. الرواية التي ثبتت أنها رواية مثلا لم تصدر عنهم، إما لأنها موضوعة أو لأنها قطعا مخالفة لكتاب الله تبارك وتعالى. وعندما نقول هذه رواية تخالف كتاب الله، يعني لا يحدد ذلك أي إنسان، لا بد أن يكون من المحققين البارعين. أحيانا عندما يقال أن هذه الرواية تخالف كتاب الله، بأدنى مراجعة نلاحظ أنها لا تخالف كتاب الله، وإنما فهم المتلقي ربما يكون فهما محدودا لم يعنه على توجيه الرواية بشكل صحيح، فتصور أنها تخالف مضامين الكتاب الكريم. ولذلك ليس من الصحيح، بل يحرم أقول هكذا، بل يحرم الاستعجال في عرض الرواية على الكتاب بهذه الكيفية السطحية والحكم عليها بأنها تخالف الكتاب. ودليلنا أو مستندنا أو مدرك الحرمة هو القول بغير علم، أو قل هو تفسير القرآن هكذا بغير علم وبغير تأمل وبغير الرجوع إلى الروايات الشريفة وإلى الأقوال الموثوقة من المحققين والعلماء في هذا المجال. بعبارة مختصرة، الاستعجال في هذا الأمر كالاستعجال في إصدار الفتاوى بدون ماذا؟ بدون تروي وبدون علم وبدون دليل. فلا بد لنا أن نكون في غاية الحذر من هذه الظاهرة المؤسفة في الواقع. عندما أتي إلى رواية لا تنسجم مع ذوقي، لا تنسجم مع فهمي، وأعرضها على آية من آيات الكتاب الكريم، وربما يكون فهمي للآية بالأساس فهم خاطئ، بالتالي أقع في هذا المحذور. فلا بد أن نكون في حذر من التعامل مع الروايات بهذا الشكل من جهة، ومن جهة أخرى الحذر من الاستماع إلى المتحدثين. هنالك متحدثون كثر على الفضائيات، على القنوات، يتحدثون بهذا المنطق، أي أنهم يحكمون على الروايات بأنها موضوعة أو أنها مكذوبة أو أنها على كل حال لا بد من الضرب بها عرض الحائط، لمجرد أنهم لم يفهموا معناها أو لأنهم تصوروا أنها تتعارض مع كتاب الله تبارك وتعالى. نحن لا ننكر أن هناك روايات تعارض كتاب الله، لكنها قليلة ويحتاج في الحكم عليها إلى تأمل وإلى بحث وإلى تدقيق وتمحيص. إذن القسم الأول هو الروايات التي ثبتت أنها روايات معتبرة فلا بد من الأخذ بها. القسم الثاني الروايات التي ثبت أنها موضوعة ومخالفة، وهذه لا شك ولا ريب أننا نضرب بها عرض الحائط ولا نعمل بها، لأنهم أمرونا بذلك صلوات الله وسلامه عليهم. قالوا ما جاءكم عنا اعرضوه على كتاب الله، ما وافق الكتاب فخذوه، هذا مضمون كلامهم، وما خالفه فاضربوا به عرض الحائط، أو أنه زخرف لم نقله، إلى آخره من الروايات التي وردت عن النبي وعن الأئمة عليهم السلام. هذا القسم الثاني. القسم الثالث هو تلك الروايات التي نشك في أنها صادرة أو أنها غير صادرة، وهذه الروايات من حيث العمل لا نستطيع العمل بها، لا نستطيع أن نحكم من خلالها أو أن نعمل على وفقها، ولكن في نفس الحين لا نستطيع أن نضرب بها عرض الحائط، لأنه لم يثبت أنها موضوعة. فلذلك لا بد من رد علمها إلى أهلها، إلى الأئمة عليهم السلام، يعني نتوقف فيها بعبارة أخرى. هذه الرواية الشريفة بيّنت لنا أدنى مرتبة من مراتب معرفة الأئمة عليهم السلام. هنالك الكثير من الروايات في مصادرنا الحديثية التي تتحدث عن معرفة الإمام. على سبيل المثال سأذكر تبركا وتيمنا رواية طويلة عن الإمام الرضا عليه السلام، أقتطع منها بعض المقاطع. هذه الرواية مروية في الاحتجاج للشيخ الطبرسي رضوان الله تعالى عليه. يقول الإمام الرضا عليه السلام: بالإمام تمام الصلاة والزكاة والصيام والحج والجهاد وتوفير الفيء والصدقات وإمضاء الحدود والأحكام ومنع الثغور والأطراف. الإمام يحلل حلال الله ويحرم حرام الله ويقيم حدود الله ويذب عن دين الله ويدعو إلى سبيل ربه بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة والحجة البالغة. الإمام كالشمس الطالعة للعالم وهي في الأفق، بحيث لا تناله الأيدي والأبصار. الإمام البدر المنير والسراج الزاهر والنور الساطع والنجم الهادي في غياهب الدجى. الإمام المطهر من الذنوب المبرأ من العيوب، مخصوص بالعلم موسوم بالحلم، نظام الدين وعز المسلمين وغيظ المارقين وبوار الكافرين. ثم يقول عليه السلام: الإمام واحد دهره، لا يدانيه أحد ولا يعادله عدل ولا يوجد له بديل ولا له مثيل ولا نظير، مخصوص بالفضل كله من غير طلب منه ولا اكتساب، بل اختصاص من المتفضل الوهاب. فمن ذا يبلغ معرفة الإمام ويمكنه اختياره؟ هيهات هيهات. إلى آخر الرواية. رواية فيها ما فيها من المضامين التي نحتاج إلى وقت طويل لكي نقف على شيء من معانيها. نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يعرفنا أئمتنا عليهم السلام، وأن يثبتنا على ولايتهم والسير بسيرتهم. اللهم عرفني نفسك، فإنك إن لم تعرفني نفسك لم أعرف نبيك. اللهم عرفني رسولك، فإنك إن لم تعرفني رسولك لم أعرف حجتك. اللهم عرفني حجتك، فإنك إن لم تعرفني حجتك ضللت عن ديني. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم، وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
for questions and answers. And for those, if you would like to submit them on the YouTube chat itself, you can do that. So I'll be monitoring that chat and I can get your questions from there. The other way, if you would like, is you can text me the questions personally, and I will put my phone number on the screen once Mehreen starts presenting. And that way you guys have two ways. The easiest way will be to do the YouTube chat, but if for whatever reason you can't access that, feel free to text me with the number that I post on the screen. Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Mehreen Walji, and I am a pharmacist with a background in drug and device development, specifically regulatory affairs. And today I will be talking about COVID-19 and the vaccine. Of course, COVID needs no introduction, and it has impacted all of us, whether it be in terms of illness, loss of a loved one, or even the way we socially interact and perform our daily tasks. Considering the effect that this has had on all of us, it was very exciting when this Turkish-German couple was able to identify a technology that could lead to a vaccine to potentially solve COVID-19. My hope today is to provide a bit of education on COVID-19 and the vaccine and its development, so you have the knowledge moving forward to make a decision for yourself. I won't go into detail on this slide, as many of you know what COVID-19 is. It is a new novel coronavirus that causes an acute respiratory syndrome. Common symptoms include fever, cough, difficulty breathing, and this can escalate to hospitalization and other complications such as pneumonia, liver distress, and cardiac injury. The CDC has been monitoring the cases and deaths associated with COVID-19 since January 2020. In the US, we are approaching almost 20 million cases, with 1.5 million cases in the past 7 days. Total deaths include over 300,000 people. Now, it's easy to look at this slide and just see numbers and compare this one to this number. However, it's important to not look at these as just values, but really think about the impact this has at a global or broad level, and a society level, and a personal level as well. It is known that death by COVID-19 is more likely to occur in the elderly population. But we are seeing deaths in the younger generation, 25 plus. So this is just signifying it's important for all of us to continue following the precautions such as wearing masks, sanitizing, to avoid getting infected and a potential death by COVID, and also protecting those who are elderly or who have other medical conditions that cause their immune system to be weakened. So the science behind vaccines. Vaccines prevent diseases or infections by utilizing the immune system. Now, the immune system is quite complex, but I will try and provide a summary today so you can understand how the COVID-19 vaccine works. When you're infected with a potential virus, bacteria, or anything foreign, the a macrophage cell basically swallows it up and tries to destroy it. However, it does retain some proteins, so it can initiate the immune response. B cells with those identified proteins start building defensive antibodies. And then your body starts transitioning from a defensive state to an offensive state, because these antibodies help facilitate these T cells to start attacking infected cells to remove the infection from your body. Now, in addition to this process, your body's also creating memory immune cells. So memory B cells and T cells, and holds on to them. Just in case you're exposed to that virus, bacteria, or pathogen again, you're equipped to fight it without getting infected. Now, vaccines elicit the same response without actually infecting you, and that's how they work and prevent infections and other diseases. So how are vaccines developed as required by the FDA? So initially, it begins in a lab. Researchers investigate how the virus actually works, and through that process, they try to find a target where they can manipulate, and that's known as a vaccine candidate. Once that's found, it moves to animal testing. where it's determined that if this can be safe or effective when it's used in humans. Prior to moving to human clinical trials, a vaccine developer will gather all this preclinical data in addition to their plans for human clinical trials for FDA review and approval. Until they get the okay from the FDA, they'll move forward to phase 1 human clinical trials. These are substantially smaller, about 20 to 100 patients, and they primarily focus on safety. If there are no major safety concerns, they'll move forward to phase 2 human clinical trials. These consist of hundreds of patients, and the primary focus is still safety, but they are gathering data on the effectiveness of the vaccine as well. So then the next step is to move forward to phase 3 human clinical trials, which consists of thousands of patients. This focuses primarily on the effectiveness of the vaccine and while still gathering safety data. Special considerations I'll get to in just a moment, but once the vaccine developer has all their data, they submit for FDA review. This is probably about 10 months. And it's a panel of clinicians and scientists that review the information to determine whether the vaccine or any product, that the benefits outweigh the risks. If so, they'll grant FDA approval. I apologize, there's a formatting issue here, but this last moment, this last visual says phase 4 FDA oversight. So it doesn't end at FDA approval. Even after the fact, in the post-market setting, FDA is gathering data and evaluating it to determine whether this still stands, whether the benefits outweigh the risks. So this whole process can take a number of years to get from a vaccine from a lab to the general public, or those who have a condition that need a treatment. Now, for special considerations, one of them being a global pandemic, FDA does alter this process. For a situation such as the one we're in, there will be increased collaboration between the pharma companies and the government agencies to expedite and expand the research being conducted for that disease state. All the predetermined timelines are removed, so this likely will no longer take 10 months. FDA will prioritize it. And there's an evaluation of interim or early data, so they'll utilize early data to make strategic decisions and determine how to move forward. With that, FDA is also allowed to issue an emergency use authorization. So essentially they utilize this interim or early data to determine whether this should be available to the general public depending on the situation. For example, it's affecting a mass amount of people and there isn't an alternative vaccine or treatment for that disease. So currently, there are 2 COVID-19 vaccines available, one manufactured by Pfizer and the other manufactured by Moderna. They're both mRNA vaccines, and I'll get into the technology of them in a bit. They're both 2 shots about 21 or 28 days apart. They do not contain eggs, preservatives, or latex. The Pfizer vaccine can be used in patients 16 and older, while the Moderna vaccine can be utilized in patients 18 years and older. You should not take the vaccine if you have potential to have a severe allergic reaction to any ingredient in the vaccine. And common side effects include pain, swelling, redness, chills, tiredness, and headache. These are pretty similar to the annual flu vaccine that you may receive. So what is an mRNA vaccine? This is considered a newer method for vaccine development, and I won't go into a full biology lesson, but just to provide a bit of background, each cell of yours has DNA, which is the molecule that contains your genetic code for replication. And then there's also messenger RNA. This carries the code information to instruct the cell how to make proteins. So an mRNA vaccine contains a material from the COVID-19 virus that gives the cell instructions for how to make a harmless protein that is unique to the virus. Copies of the protein are made and the material from the vaccine is destroyed. The immune system identifies the foreign protein and creates B cells and T cells to destroy it. And now your human body is now equipped to fight COVID-19 when exposed to the actual virus. So we talked a little bit about, the phase 3 trials, and both of these vaccines did undergo phase 3 clinical trials at a global level. The number of participants for the Pfizer vaccine was over 40,000, while it was over 30,000 for Moderna. The time to follow up was 2 months. For the Pfizer vaccine, it was 95% effective in preventing COVID 28 days after receiving the second dose, while Moderna was also almost 95% effective 2 weeks after receiving the second dose. Side effects were mild to moderate that resolved within 1 to 2 days, and they included injection site pain, fatigue, aches, chills, etc. These trials are not done. They're still ongoing with an estimated completion date in January 2023 and October 2022. However, the FDA did issue that emergency use authorization because of the data that they received at 2 months. So the vaccine distribution plan is that, as we know, healthcare workers and first responders are already receiving the vaccine. Next up will be the individuals with medical conditions and those who are long-term care residents. Phase 3 is essential workers, teachers, prisons, shelters, and young adults. And then phase 4 will be the general public, which would probably be anticipated around summer of 2021, inshallah. So in conclusion, I know a lot of people will maybe think that, oh, you know, development of this vaccine was rushed. But I would say that vaccine development was prioritized by both the pharmaceutical companies and the government, as there is an ongoing global pandemic. And my video here is not working, but essentially I picture the FDA completely clearing their desks and focusing on the data for this vaccine to ensure that we can avoid infection and go back to a state of normalcy in the future. FDA issued an emergency use authorization based on their efficacious interim data. As mentioned, they were both 95% effective after 2 months, and the current side effects is similar to other vaccines. And the clinical trials will be going on for the next 2 years and with continued surveillance by the companies and the government. And even if you're someone who receives the vaccine, or when we all receive the vaccine, it'll still take time, and precautions such as wearing masks, social distancing, and sanitizing are still to be incorporated, even if you are an individual who received the vaccine. With that, I conclude my presentation, and we'll have questions now, or maybe in a little bit, I'll let Ibrahim let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mehreen. So I think what we'll do is we'll hold off to the end for any questions. We'll let Sayyid Muntadher go next, but thank you so much for your presentation. I think it really helped to demystify a lot of the things that we might not understand about these like new vaccines. And I think there's a lot of fear just around the virus itself, and I think some of that has kind of gone on to the vaccine. So this really helps even just me, just to know more details about it, and to help get it out of the shadows and make it more understandable to the average person. So thank you so much. Inshallah, we will have Sayyid speaking next, and we got a sense of the technical and scientific background behind these vaccines. And of course, an important part of it is also the religious aspect of it. So we'll take some time to dive into that. So Sayyid, I'll just start off with just a general question. Inshallah, we can dive into this. Is it permissible to get this vaccine? Is it wajib? Is it mustahab? What is kind of the guidance around getting it?
Ahsan, thank you very much. First and foremost, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, respected brothers and sisters. And thank you for holding this panel discussion to speak on this very important topic. Also, special thanks to our respected sister Mehreen for this great presentation. There are several key points that I should highlight as a prelude to answering the question from the religious standpoint. The religious rulings in general are of two types. We have what's called primary rulings, and we have secondary rulings, ahkam awwaliyah and ahkam thanawiyah. Primary rulings is the ruling that is given to something, to whatever subject it may be, whether it's something related to our actions, related to other things that revolve around our actions. In the end, everything we do falls under action. So let's put it this way. All of our actions fall under one of the primary rulings. And we know that the primary rulings are divided into 5. Brother Ibrahim mentioned a couple of them, right? obligatory, recommended, abhorred or detestable, forbidden, and then of course mubah, permissible. Now, these 5 primary rulings apply to any of our actions. The general principle is known as the principle of ibaha, the primacy principle of permissibility, meaning that everything as a primary ruling, everything is permissible for you until otherwise proving that it is not permissible, whether it is obligatory, whether it is forbidden, whether it is recommended, whether it is abhorred. All these things have to be proven, and of course through the Quran or by the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, we understand that certain actions are obligatory upon us and certain actions are forbidden for us, and certain are mustahab, recommended, and others are makruh, detestable, but the majority of our actions fall under permissible. Now, this is the primary ruling. The second type of ruling is the secondary ruling, al-hukm al-thanawi, and this is a ruling that overrides the primary ruling because of a special circumstance. Now, let's use a couple of examples here. Water is permissible. The primary ruling for water, it's permissible in Islam. Now, when somebody chooses not to drink water, can we say that it is forbidden that they don't drink water? No. But if this person abandons drinking water for a long time, such that their life is now at risk, what happens to the permissibility of drinking water? It is now overridden by a secondary ruling that says drinking water, in this case, is obligatory. So now we have the primary ruling of the permissibility of water changing to a secondary ruling, which is the obligatoriness of drinking water. So drinking water has shifted from being permissible to now being what? Obligatory, by virtue of the secondary ruling which arised from the circumstance. Now, let's use another example. Eating pork is forbidden. That's the primary ruling for it. But if somebody somehow is trapped in a desert and there's nothing but pork and their life is in danger, they must eat a small portion to the extent that saves their life. Now we see a shift here. The pork that was primarily considered forbidden, haram, is now shifting to a secondary ruling that says it is obligatory, wajib. It's not saying it's permissible, no, it's going beyond permissible and saying it's wajib. So shifting from haram to wajib, shifting from permissible to wajib. See how the shift is from the primary ruling to the secondary ruling due to the circumstance and the situation. Now, you may say, is there a background or a reference in the Holy Quran or in the Hadith by the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt for this? Yes, there's a lot of reference to that, but I'll just quote one ayah from the Holy Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إنما حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل به لغير الله فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فلا إثم عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has forbidden you to eat that which has not been properly slaughtered, blood, pork, and the flesh of any animal which has not been consecrated with a mention of the name of God. However, in an emergency, without the intention of transgression or repeating transgression, one will not be considered to have committed a sin. God is all forgiving and all merciful. So this verse is talking about someone who is desperate to eating the flesh of a maita, an animal that has not been slaughtered according to the Islamic laws, or pork, and the other examples mentioned in that holy verse. It's saying that when you are in a state of an emergency, that becomes permissible for you. Rather, it also can become obligatory, as we've mentioned, if somebody's life is at risk. I hope now I was able to clearly explain the difference between the primary ruling and the secondary ruling. Now, as we mentioned in the beginning, that most things fall under the law of permissibility or the primacy of permission, asalatul ibaha. That's the primary ruling. Again, the secondary ruling, depending on the situation, can vary. It can change from permissible to obligatory, from permissible to forbidden, or from forbidden to permissible, or from forbidden to obligatory, and so on and so forth. Now, let us come to the COVID vaccine and try to apply these principles that we've just explained. Now, the COVID vaccine, let's first look for the primary ruling of COVID vaccine. Now, COVID vaccine in and of itself, just merely when we're talking that special vaccine that is injected into somebody's body, anything that you inject in your body, irrespective of any other titles that can apply, it is permissible. Why? Because there is the, as we've mentioned, asalatul ibaha, the primacy of permission. Everything is permissible unless otherwise mentioned that it is not permissible. For example, the COVID vaccine did not exist during the time of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, so that we look for it in the Holy Quran or look for it in the narrations to see what they said about COVID, right? Because it didn't exist at that point, obviously. So now it is part of the things that just newly happened, right? And because it is something new, the primary ruling for anything that comes up that has not been mentioned in the Holy Quran or in the tradition of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt falls under the law of permissibility, meaning it is permissible. That's the primary ruling. Now, can that shift to a secondary ruling? Yes, there are multiple scenarios, but I want your attention to these scenarios because sometimes, unfortunately, when a religious scholar explains a ruling, when the listener is not listening to all aspects of the situation, they may leave with wrong understanding. And it is very important that we make sure you do not take the wrong meaning of what we're trying to say here. So please pay close attention to these scenarios. Scenario number one is if the person believes or has fear that their life is in danger because of this virus, meaning that if they were to catch this virus, there's a good chance that their life might be in danger. So now we have fear of severe or serious harm. Now, and there are multiple ways to avoid and to protect and prevent that serious harm from coming. Then the ruling is that it continues to be permissible. Meaning I have multiple ways of preventing myself from COVID and from the serious effects of COVID. One of it is to just do the precautionary measures, wear a mask, social distancing, avoid being in gatherings, and so on and so forth. If that is a way to protect me, then the vaccine is just permissible, meaning it's optional. Whether you take it or not, it's up to you. Now, this is scenario number one. Scenario number two, I still have multiple means, but the side effects of that vaccine pose serious harm to my health. And because we know in Islam, anything that can pose serious harm to one's health is forbidden, then that permissibility, which is the primary ruling of taking that vaccine, will shift to a secondary ruling, and that is prohibition, hurma. So now the vaccine from permissible, it has shifted to impermissible, to unlawful. It is prohibited. Why? If that person knows that taking this vaccine will result in serious harm. So this is the second scenario. Third scenario, there is no way to protect myself as a person from serious harm but to take this vaccine. In other words, the serious health issues that I will encounter are beyond the precautionary measures, meaning even if I take precautionary measures, my life or my health is still in serious risk. And the only means to prevent that risk is COVID vaccine. Now pay attention to this. The only means, meaning that with all honesty, I have consulted the experts in the healthcare and everyone that I know, and I have come to a conclusion that no matter what I do, if I don't take the vaccine, think of it like this. Think of the example where a person is in a desert and the only thing in front of them is that piece of the pork and their life is in danger and there's no alternative. So think of it like that. There is no alternative but this COVID vaccine to save my life. Then of course, it shifts from permissible to obligatory. And that person's case, it would be obligatory. And this is why we can say also that this is a case-by-case scenario. Somebody may say, well, even if I get COVID, I'm not in high risk of being, for example, of being affected seriously. While another person says, no, if I get COVID, I might be affected seriously. I might lose my life. So here we have to put this into the equation as well. So again, each person has to apply these general rulings in their case. Religious scholars, fuqaha, jurists cannot tell you, just like how when somebody calls the alim, the jurist or the scholar, and says to them, should I fast in the month of Ramadan or not because I am sick, the scholar can never tell them fast or don't fast. He's going to give them the general criterion and say to them, you apply it. If you will result, or this fasting will result in severe serious harm or serious harm for you or your fetus if it's a woman who's pregnant, or if this will entail severe unbearable hardship, then don't fast. But who's the one to decide whether this is serious harm for me or not, severe hardship for me or not? You as a mukallaf, as a duty-bound person. So in summary, we have different types of rulings. We have the primary ruling for everything, and we have the secondary ruling. The primary ruling for taking the COVID vaccine, meaning in and of itself, it is permissible. You have the choice to take it or not take it. The secondary ruling is that we have to look at the effects. If there are serious effects to this vaccine, then it is not permissible to take it by virtue of the secondary ruling. But if there is no serious effects, and that is the only means to prevent myself and to protect my health from the serious effects of contracting the virus, then it becomes obligatory in my case. So we have obligatory, we have forbidden, and we have permissible. Three rulings that may apply. The default ruling is permissible. You can take it. But if it entails serious health issues, it is prohibited. If it does not entail serious health issues, but it is the only means to protect me, then of course it becomes obligatory. So now we have three scenarios: permissible, obligatory, and forbidden. I'd like to conclude here so that I give time for people who want to ask for clarification or add any other inputs and allow you to speak and express your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sayyid. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. I think it is always nice to see the rich level of understanding and contemplation that goes into these decisions. I think a lot of times we may ask questions, and there might be questions that we're asking soon where we just want a yes or no. We want a stamp, and we want just the words yes or no. And like you said, like you had laid out, there's more to it than that we are provided with the tools, and inshallah we can make those correct decisions as they apply to us. I will start with a question for you, Sayyid, if that's okay.
Go ahead, no problem.
So you had mentioned the idea of like the interplay between different rulings. So one question that comes up is, if somebody finds that the vaccine is permissible for them, or perhaps obligatory, what happens to that rule if that child, in this case, has parents that say that they don't want them to get it, or vice versa, the parents want them to get it and the child doesn't want to get it?
That's a very good question. And here's the answer. First thing we have to take into consideration is what is the ruling in the case of that child. So for example, if that child has determined through the, of course, putting into the equation, resorting to the doctor, the experts, and he has come to conclusion that there is no way to prevent him or herself from the harm, the serious harm, but to take the vaccine. So now it is obligatory in his case to take the vaccine. If his parents say, don't take the vaccine, then he cannot take what his parents say, simply because now the ruling in his case is obligatory. And when something is obligatory, it cannot be changed by the the request of a parent, meaning my parents cannot tell me to avoid an obligatory act. Now, if it was permissible, meaning that no, I have come to conclusion that no, I don't have to take it. It's an option. I can either wear a mask and practice social distancing, or I can take it. I have the option. But my father, out of his compassion, or my mother, out of their concern for me, they fear that this might have severe side effects. They don't want me to take it. Then yes, I have to take their word for it, irrespective of how old I am, how smart I am, and how old or how smart my parents are. So if I was 70 and my father's 90 years old and still, sane, and he says to me, son, I don't want you to take that vaccine out of compassion, out of fear, and it is not obligatory in my case to take that vaccine, then I have to take his word for it. Otherwise, if it is obligatory in my case to take the vaccine and he says don't, then I cannot take his word and rather follow the obligation. Now, vice versa, again, if the vaccine is permissible in my case, it's not obligatory, right? And my parents say, we want you to take it, then I would have to take it at that point, simply because it's permissible. I can take it or leave it. But when my parents say, we want you to take it, that changes it from being permissible to being obligatory in my case, by virtue of the request of my father and mother, if that request stems from their compassion and care for me, and it does not stem from just having OCD, or they're just too worried and it's just beyond the norm. This is, in summary, the answer to this question. If you have a follow-up or want more clarification, please let me know, Brother Ibrahim.
Thank you, Sayyid. We'll come back to you on the next question, if it's okay. We'll go to Mehreen for one question. Sure. Dr. Mehreen, so, and I guess this ties in with what Sayyid was saying, the idea of the risks associated with the vaccine. With the way that the emergency use authorizations were put in by the FDA, were the vaccines tested properly?
That's a good question, and I think that's what's running through everyone's head, considering the time of COVID infection to vaccine development. And I just want to note that these did undergo phase 3 trials, and it was a requirement by the FDA, the number of patients. Usually in a phase 3 trial, you'd see maybe 3,000 to 5,000, and that would be considered robust. These had 40,000 and 30,000 patients. So that's a good set of data and a population where you can draw a conclusion. And FDA, in comparison to the UK, which did provide an authorization prior to the US, they did have that requirement of 2-month follow-up data, that how many patients did receive who received the vaccine versus a placebo actually were contracted COVID, and those who did not. And if I recall the statistic correctly, 1 week after receiving the first dose, 50% of people were found to be exposed to COVID but not affected. So I think that although it was conducted quickly, it comes back to that concept of that this was prioritized, and FDA, based on the nature of the disease and the nature of the technology behind the vaccine, did work with the pharmaceutical companies that did develop these to develop a robust study. And it was, the 2-month data is there, and they're continuously following up throughout the next 2 years to understand the long-term information as well. And I think, of course, I do acknowledge that, if someone were to receive the vaccine, we don't know the long-term complications. Right now, it seems that they're pretty similar to like a flu vaccine and what you'd experience with that. But we also don't know the long-term complications of COVID either. So since this is a novel disease, there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of research moving forward, and we'll have more answers to these types of questions as time continues, inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. Mehreen. I appreciate it. Also, Mehreen, would you mind just going over what the main side effects were? I know it was kind of a short list. I don't know if you're able to pull that up, but if you can just go over those again. It does kind of connect to the next question that will actually be for Sayyid, but I just wanted to get that refreshed in people's minds.
So I guess I'll go into a little bit of depth with this, but you know, a vaccine is initiating an immune response in your body. So therefore, you know, I know a lot of people will say like, oh, you know, I don't get the flu vaccine because it gives me the flu. So either you were exposed to the flu before you got the vaccine, or because of that immune response being elicited, you will experience some symptoms such as, you know, fever, which this also happened in the COVID-19 vaccine trials, fever, body aches, just a general, you know, sense of different of well-being. A lot of, in this situation, a lot of the main adverse event was local injection site reaction. So it's injected in the arm, and you may experience a little bit of pain and swelling at the injection site in addition to redness. Now, if that becomes overwhelming, that's considered dangerous, and you have to inform your physician, or in the case of the clinical trials, the clinical trial evaluator. So as mentioned, the side effect profile is similar to other vaccines, and I would say that it's if you take the flu vaccine and you have some symptoms as I described previously, then that's what would be probably expected at this stage with the COVID-19 vaccine, unless you happen to be allergic to an ingredient which may cause an allergic reaction. So it's important to review that prior to taking it.
Thank you. Thanks for providing that extra detail too. Sayyid, we've gotten multiple questions related to this. You had spoken about putting the interplay of the rulings in terms of the risk to yourself. We talked a little bit about also how your parents' wishes come into that also. But another piece of it is the idea of the benefit to the community or the people around you. So in certain cases, maybe somebody who is at higher risk, in which case, under normal circumstances, they would have to, or it would be obligatory potentially for them to get the vaccine. They are not able to get it because it is dangerous for them for whatever reason. They may not be able to take it. They may be out of the age group or be at high risk in another way. So how does the risk or the benefits to the people around us, aside from ourselves, impact where the vaccine falls, whether it's permissible or obligatory or impermissible for us?
Very good. So now, taking into consideration the fact that it is permissible. Now let's stay with that, it's permissible, assuming that there is no serious harmful effects. Assuming under this condition that the vaccine does not have any serious, and now when I say serious, you have to put 3 lines under that, because to get a small fever here and there, to kind of, get minor headaches there and there, that does not fall under serious, right? These are normal things. They're not forbidden for us to get a headache or to get a minor fever. We're talking serious. If there is no serious harmful effects for a person's health, then it is permissible. Now, it is permissible, but I have multiple options. I choose not to take it. Rather, I want to take regular precautions and regular social distancing. But if I were to take it, there is a bigger chance that I would protect those who are around me. Then it would be something more desired. Then Islam might say to you, okay, because it is recommended in general to protect other people or benefit other people, and there's benefit to others by you taking it, and again, under the assumption that it is still permissible, there's no harmful effects, then yes, it would be desirable, but it still will not go to the level of obligatory. Obligatory is whenever there is no other means but to take it. So in other words, if I live with someone and there's no other way for me to avoid harming or transferring that virus to that someone. Let's say it's me and my wife, and let's say she is at high risk, or vice versa, and I would not be able to avoid contact with her, right? Our life would be hardship if we have to separate and be in 2 different rooms all the time or 2 different homes. And at that point, there is no other way to prevent her, who has a serious health condition, for example, from that harmful effect, then I have to do anything in order to avoid giving her, because it would be forbidden, it would be haram, forbidden for me to transfer the virus knowing that I can easily get it and transfer it without taking precautionary measures. As the Marja'iyya mentioned, we have to take precautionary measures. If my precautionary measures fail to protect her, my wife, or that other person from transferring the virus to them, then there is no other way but to take the vaccine to protect them. Then yes, it can be obligatory upon me to take the vaccine. But again, you have to look at all these restrictions. It's not like yes or no, or yeah, go ahead and take it or don't take it. A faqih, a alim, cannot issue that ruling, because it would be making up a ruling on behalf of Allah, and that's haram, of course. So we have to be very, very particular. We have to be very, very particular. If there's other means, we have to practice these other means. If I still can, take the precautionary measures, wear the mask, social distancing, and even if I have someone with a serious health condition, I'm still able to prevent them by doing what I'm doing right now, which is wearing a mask, washing my hands, and doing all these recommendations, then I don't have to take the vaccine. Again, only when there is no other alternative, and that my life is at risk or their life is at risk, and there's no way I can separate myself from them. Now, if there's a way to separate myself from them, and that would not result in severe hardship, meaning for the time being we can be in 2 different rooms and that would be okay and I would be okay, then it would not be obligatory upon me to take it. Again, you have to think of it when there's no other way out of it, then it becomes darura. When it becomes darura, a necessity, then it becomes obligatory.
Thank you very much, Sayyid. I always appreciate your attention to detail when you're providing these answers.
You're welcome.
I did have just one quick question for you, Sayyid. Can you get the vaccine while you're fasting? Would it break a fast to get a vaccine like this?
That's a good question. No, any type of injection would not break the fast, according to His Eminence, Sayyid Sistani, because what breaks the fast is eating or drinking. As long as you're not consuming it by mouth, it's coming as an injection, it should not break your fast.
Thank you, Sayyid. For Dr. Mehreen, there is, and even in some of the questions we're getting, there is this still like a hesitancy related to the vaccine. I was wondering if you could address some of the concerns. There is things that are closer to conspiracy theories, such as because it's an mRNA vaccine and there is less experience with it, people believe that it could change your genetic makeup to the point where I even heard that it could turn people into crocodiles and make women grow beards. So these are 2 things that I have heard, and I know it might be making light of that situation, but there is a real hesitancy to these things, and I'm seeing it in the questions that are coming in, and I've heard it when talking to people about the vaccine. Is there any light that you can shed on that, besides the information that you've already provided for us, on if these concerns are valid, and how we could potentially protect ourselves from misinformation that might be out there?
Okay, that's an interesting question. And yes, mRNA is a more recent development in vaccine technology. So, you have different types of vaccines, such as which other companies are developing, like an inactivated vaccine or a vector vaccine, and this is an mRNA vaccine. So just from my background knowledge on, physiology and biochemistry, your genetic makeup is made by your DNA. So with this, because this impacts mRNA, it would never change your genetic code because it's not impacting that. It's just teaching your cell to make a protein that looks like COVID-19, that's harmless, to elicit an immune response. So I think because of the technology that is utilized in mRNA, and it is affecting your genetics in a way, it's utilizing your genetic process for cell multiplication. there is some, I guess, conspiracy theories going on about that. But I think, ultimately, I trust it personally, because I work in regulatory, these regulatory agencies in the UK and the US would not, there's clear regulations on how to develop a drug or a vaccine or any type of medical product. So essentially it wouldn't go through all this testing. And if we were to identify, anything, something like that, it would be stopped at phase 1. So I in my professional opinion, this will not impact your genetics, and probably it's best to utilize resources such as the CDC and others, reliable resources for your information, to ensure that you have the right education. And as I think the Sayyid mentioned, you have options, and it's best to research the right information to make the best decision for yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Mehreen. I think I have a feeling, and maybe it's already gone around, but that there are probably WhatsApp things going around that have different theories than the things you've mentioned. So it's nice to hear just recommendations to look at the CDC, to look at some of these better places rather than picking up anything that might come along on our phones. Let me see. Just checking if we had any more questions here. Sayyid, we had talked about the idea between the parents and the children. As a parent, would you be responsible to get or to make your dependents get the vaccine? So in that case, it might be your children. Does the ruling kind of extend to your dependents too?
Yes. So in general, a person is responsible to protect and to make sure that the best, to do the best of interest, or make sure that they have done the best they can for their children with respect to protecting them from any harm. So for example, when it is cold outside, and I know my child will go outside and get a cold, it is my duty as a parent to make sure they are covered and they are wearing enough clothes so they don't get cold, because they are an amana, they are entrusted, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entrusted me with, until they become adults and they're able or capable of making decisions on their own. So as a parent, as a father, of course, as we know, the guardianship in Islam is given to the father. As a father who's the guardian of the child, I have to make the choice with respect to whatever is in their interest. So if there is no harmful effect and there is alternatives, as we've mentioned, then I have the option. If I can make sure that my children are observing social distancing, or they are at home and they don't have a way to get the to contract the virus, meaning they are protected, then I don't have an obligation to get them the vaccine. But if, again, there is a high risk and there is no way for them to be protected from it, they go to school, they go other places, and there's no way to control that, then perhaps it may become obligatory for me to make sure they get the vaccine. Again, if that COVID would pose a serious harm to them. That has to be taken into consideration. If someone says, no, COVID, when I get it, it's like getting any normal cold, then of course that does not mean. So COVID in itself, we can't say that in itself it's considered a serious harm. Yes, it may entail serious harm for certain people, but for those who don't have the fear of that serious harm, we can't treat them in that way and say, well, as long as you will get COVID, you have to take the vaccine, right? It's just like the flu virus. A lot of people don't take the flu virus, the flu vaccine, but when they contract the virus, they become sick for a little while, then they go back and they live normally. So it depends on the person and the case that they are in. Likewise, their children in that same scenario.
Thanks again, Sayyid. We'll end with one more question for Dr. Mehreen. To confirm, the vaccine itself would, at least with the options we currently have, they wouldn't prevent you from getting COVID, but they may help you fight COVID if you get it. Is that correct?
Yes. So I think that's an important note you brought up. So I think just, I'm always going to go back to the clinical trial data, and just so for everyone's awareness, it's not a situation where those participants receive the vaccine and then they're put in a room with someone with COVID and they see who gets it and who does it. It doesn't work that way. But essentially, they received the vaccine and went on their way, and were still advised to, follow the precautions such as wearing masks, etc. So it helps. The idea is that we continue to use the measures to avoid contracting the virus. And if in the instance that we do, our immune system is equipped to fight it because it's already generated those memory cells to fight it and to avoid us getting infected and removing the virus from our body.
Thank you, Dr. Mehreen, for providing that information, and for the rest of the information that you provided in this presentation. And Sayyid, I appreciate all the information you have provided. And I think with these two pieces, we can inshallah make the best decision for ourselves and for the people around us. We will be continuing with the rest of the program at this time. Sayyid, if you did have something to say at the end of this, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, we will be continuing, I believe, with ziyarat.
Inshallah, before the ziyarah, there is a couple of things I want to say. There is something that we have to keep in mind here. One is that we have to do what rational people would do: consult those who know and take this issue seriously, right? As we know, for the betterment of our children, our families, and our community as a whole. So we have to kind of consult the experts as much as we can. At the same time, we don't want to hurry up and do something that we may regret later on. So we kind of want to be in the middle here and make sure that we do not make fast decisions or ignore making the decision and just leave things the way they are. So we try to kind of be rational about it. That's one. Two, if we come to a conclusion that this is what's right for me and my family, I cannot impose that on other people. So please let us live this democracy with making decisions. So if me and my family choose to get the, let's say the vaccine, I should not go to my brother and his family and kind of nag on their head to say, well, you have to get it, I got it. No, everyone knows their taklif well. Everyone is responsible to make the decision. It should not be like a stigma or something that we label people with. Oh, this is the family that didn't take the vaccine. And we start talking about them, or no, this is the family that took the vaccine. We want to make sure that we give everyone the right to make the decision that they feel they are comfortable with. Again, we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. We don't want to say, oh, this person is so negligent, they didn't take the vaccine, they don't follow the rules. Or no, this person is taking the vaccine and putting their life at risk or their family at risk. We don't want to take either side. We want to say that everyone is rational enough to make the right decision. That's one. The second thing I want to say before I was requested to recite Ziyarat Warith, so inshallah I'll recite it in a few seconds. I'd like to say a few words for a young couple who will be having their nikah ceremony next week on Thursday, December 31st, and that is Brother Muhammad Hussein Niknam and Sister Fatima Iman Dawji. First and foremost, I pray to our beloved Lord and merciful and kind Lord, Allah exalted and glorified, to bless you both, Muhammad Hussein and Sister Fatima. And I ask Allah to fill your lives with blessings and success, and let your marriage be a successful marriage filled with happiness, filled with joy, and with all goodness, inshallah. On this occasion, I'd like to send my congrats to you both, Brother Muhammad Hussein Niknam and Sister Fatima Iman Dawji, and to your families and friends and community, and want to tell you something that is that I think is very important. You've made the right decision, of course. Getting married is the best thing, especially for young people in this country, anywhere in the world. In today's world, I think it is very important to get married for the young ones, of course, if it is suitable for their situation. Now, one thing that you will earn as getting married, one of the first blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised you through the Ahlul Bayt, of course, is that you will be getting multiple reward for the salah that you make. Now, the salah that you make as a single person has great reward, but when you become married, your salah has a reward of a higher rate. It's a lot higher than the normal person who is not married. The narration here I'll quote it from Wasa'il al-Shi'a by Al-Hur al-Amili, one of our great scholars. He reports by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that he had said, ركعتان يصليهما متزوج أفضل من 70 ركعة يصليها أعزب. He says 2 units of prayer a married person performs is better than 70 performed by a single person. So this is just one of the first blessings that you'll receive out of the many that will come. Inshallah, Allah will give you both Muhammad, Hussein, and Fatima a great life and a great marriage, inshallah, filled with blessings. Again, congratulations to you and to your families, and for the blessings of this marriage, let us all, wherever we may be, recite a loud salawat for brother Muhammad Hussein and sister Fatima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى روح كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه، السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الزكي الناصح، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم، وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوطهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي، فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام، فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، وألحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد.